In your interview, well, actually, okay, I'll edit that out. It just makes me uncomfortable. What's up, friends, family, and future MDs? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of AD's RX for MD. Today, I am going to be continuing in my med school application series, and I'm going to be talking about the interview process. If you have not seen my other videos, I do have one video on the overview of the application timeline, and then I have another video on the exact step-by-step method that I use to write my personal statement, and I will link that for you guys up above. But today, let's get into the interview. So the first thing it's important to know about the interview is the purpose of an interview. And really, it's just for the school to get to know you and to assess your personality and how you can contribute to the environment there. So today I want to talk about the things that I did before my interview day to prepare for it, as well as what I did on interview day, during my interview, and talk about how I set myself up for the virtual interviews. So the first thing that you want to do is brush up on any notable activities that you mentioned in your application. This can include research or other projects that you were part of, because it's likely that before they get into all the personal questions, you're going to be asked about some of those things you did, what you did, and if it's, say, a complicated research project and it's been a while since you've done it, like for me, you might have forgotten a few of the details and you just need to go and refresh so that you can speak to that issue without forgetting some of the main points. The next tip that I have for you is another tip that I talked about in my overall application tips. As soon as you submit your secondary, start researching the schools and learn what's important to the schools and things that might be specific about each school so you can answer some of their questions with ease. While you're doing the research on the schools, you also want to be collecting potential interview questions. So when you're answering these questions, you want to always make sure that you come up with answers that can vary a little bit, but you always want to bring the answer back into why that helps you be better prepared to be a doctor. So I have a pretty long list of potential questions that you can just use to practice, and I will mention some of them now and then I'll have the rest of them in the description box. But generally you want to focus on questions that ask about how you've grown. You want to focus on introspective questions. You want to focus on some of the activities that you've been a part of. You want to focus on character development questions. You want to really, one of the big ones that I think a lot of med schools like to ask is how you've identified certain weak spots or points of improvement over the past few years, or say during undergrad, and what you've done about it. So some specific questions you can start looking at are, what do you like to do for fun? How do you balance work and free time? How do you handle stress? What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned up until this point in your life? What makes you unique? This is a really important one that schools love to ask because they want to know if you are even aware of how you uniquely can contribute to their environment and to the field of medicine. So some of the things that you can talk about to address this question are if you have other interests outside of medicine that helped you to cultivate certain traits. So for me, music was one of those things. But if you are a really good writer, that can be something you can talk about. You could talk about sports. There's a lot of discipline and teamwork, for example, in sports. And then of course, there's the question, why do you want to go here? This is a question you should be prepared for every single school that you apply to. And so some of the things that you can answer that question with are maybe one or two items from the curriculum, but you don't need a whole lot because for the most part, what you're learning is going to be the same across all institutions. Location is a really good one. Schools actually like to know that you like the area, you'll be happy in the area, and especially if you have family in the area. Another thing that can be unique to a school is its class size. If you have a school that has a uniquely small class size and that's something that matters to you, that's something you can talk about. If it's a research school, a research intensive school, and you know that they have lots of research in a certain area that you're interested in, that can be something else that you use to answer why do you want to go here question. So the next big tip that I have for you is after you have identified which interview questions you want to work with and practice with, write short essays to answer each question. So this part might seem weird because you think you don't want to be too rehearsed, you don't want to sound like you're reading, and that's correct. So I'm going to tell you how I did it and how it came off very natural the day of my interview. So I would write a little paragraph for each question that I had, and then I would read through my flow. The reason why this was important for me is because I like to talk. I'm a talker, and so sometimes I will make a good point and then I'll say, maybe I didn't make it good enough. I need to try to reiterate. So I thought the best thing for me to do is really collect my thoughts, think about them, write them down, figure out the order and the flow, and then I'll know exactly what I want to say, and there's no need to really go beyond that. I did all of my editing while it was a document, because when you're trying to almost edit your thoughts live, it can come off like you don't quite know what you're saying or you're easily sidetracked. After I had my responses typed out, I would read through it maybe once or twice. I would say that's the sweet spot. You don't want to read through it too many times because then you will sound rehearsed. After reading through it once or twice, when I would then go through my document and look at the question, I would just speak to what I remembered I had discussed. And it came off natural because I wasn't hooked to the paper, but it also came off very eloquently. So that's all of the interview preparation that I did. Now let's talk about the day of the interview. So of course you're going to be nervous, but you absolutely have to be confident because that's something that med schools want to assess as well. If they see an interviewee who doesn't exhibit confidence, they may question whether or not you're ready for the med school environment. One thing that can help you maintain your confidence is knowing that if you've gotten an interview invite, they already think you are qualified. Your stats are enough, your activities are enough. Again, this interview is really just about getting to know you. So helping to remember that will help kind of calm you down and really boost your confidence. The next thing is you definitely want to be genuine. You want to make sure you're not sounding too robotic, not sounding too rehearsed, or like you're not trying too hard. Going along with being genuine is you just want to loosen up. Now, you don't want to be slouching in your chair and leaning back and all of that, but you don't want to feel uncomfortable or nervous or jittery. You want to just sound like you're having a conversation, because that's really what it's going to be like. A lot of med school interviews actually turn out to be pretty conversational. Maybe you're asked a few questions, but after that, they really just want to get a sense of who you are. One thing that's really nice to do to make a connection and a lasting imprint in your interviewer's mind is to try to find a point of commonality and talk about it. So this can be more difficult depending on the setting, but say you see something on the wall, like if you're doing a virtual interview, you see something on the wall that is memorabilia from a specific sports team, and say it's a team that you like. Maybe you can point that out and say something about it, and you've created like a personal connection with your interviewer, and they're more likely to remember you later when the committee comes back together. The last step that I have for during the interview is do not be afraid to ask for more time if they ask you a question that you have to think about, because if you just go in and you're not really prepared, and you might say something that could backfire on you later, but interviewers are going to appreciate someone who's able to recognize that they need to take a minute to think about it, and whatever answer you come up with after it's been formulated, it's not like it's bad that it took you some time, because it is still an answer that you thought of, so it gives them insight into your thought process. Now let's talk about setup. This is specific to virtual interviews. I'm not sure how interviews are going to be in this upcoming cycle, but if they are still virtual, there's a few things you need to think about. So the first one is, where are you going to have your interview? If you have a home office or a library or a study, that would be a great place to do it. But if you don't, you can still create a space that looks professional. Basically, all you need is, if possible, a blank wall and a chair where you're sitting up upright. This chair would not suffice for an interview because it is more of a lounging chair. So you want a chair where you can sit up and you feel supported and your body is nice and elongated. You also want to look professional, so I would just say the safest bet is to wear a suit. That's what I did. I can insert a little clip of what I wore on my interview day. Lighting is very important, and this can be hard to manage if you're doing a virtual interview at home. So what I did for my interviews, I actually had a little clip ring light. It was very small, very portable, and I can probably show you a picture of it. But it provided me enough light to really light up my face and make me the subject of the camera. But also it had a stand on it for my phone. And I used my phone for my interviews because I wanted to make sure I didn't have any issues with Wi-Fi. If you were going to use a phone, it might be harder to get a good position where it's not like looking at you from down here or too high. This stand really made it perfect. It provided the light that I needed and also allowed me to have the phone in a position that was very professional, where you could just kind of see like what you would see in a chest shot. If you are using a laptop, definitely prop your laptop up with some books so that it's at eye level and you're not, like, again, looking down into the camera. This is something you won't be able to do in person, but for me, it was really helpful to have some of the biggest points that I knew I wanted to make and didn't want to forget in front of my face. So I kind of typed the most important things up and I had it right in front of me, positioned in such a way that it's literally right by the camera. And if those questions came up and I just started blanking and getting nervous, I had the information that I needed right there. It's also very important to make sure if you are doing a virtual interview that you test your setup and connections before interview day. So these are just the things that came to my mind for this video. If there are more questions that you have, you can definitely ask down below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.